During the warmer months, farmers cultivated all these fields. But now, they're covered by a silent blanket of snow. These fields have supported many generations of farmers, but their bounty is never yielded without a struggle. Mushrooms in the fields, fish in the rice paddies, ripe fruit, and country-style liquor, all often remind city people of the existence of this piece of land in the countryside. The food on the New Year's Eve table represents the past year's harvest and their hopes for the year to come. This is the last year for Forest Ranger Fung Wenchang at the forestry station. Workers at the station still have to prune the trees and go on fire prevention patrols before the holiday. They begin these tasks in early winter in order to cover the large area before the holiday. 59-year-old Fung Wenchang has reached retirement age. When Fung Wenchang finishes for the day, he'll return home for the Chinese New Year celebrations. He works far from the forestry station, so he eats the lunch prepared for him by his wife in a clearing on the mountainside. The fungus in his lunch was produced in the field behind Fung's house. Like most families living at the foot of this mountain, Fung and his wife carefully tend a small patch of black fungus. When he retires, black fungus will become the family's main source of income. The small town of Huangsongdian in Jiaohe Jilin province is famous for its high-quality black fungus. Almost every household here cultivates it. There's a large difference in temperature between day and night in June, which is the best time to plant the fungus. With their eyes narrowing from the dust, Fung Wenchang and his wife mix the wood chips, rice chaff and bean flour and then fill many small packets with the mixture. Wild black fungus has become increasingly scarce in recent years, so now many people use a mixture like this to cultivate it artificially. The black fungus matures in less than 2 months. Mr. Fung and his wife have a lot of painstaking work to do before they can harvest the fungus. Packets stuffed with the mixture have to be sterilized in a steamer overnight before use. Then Fung's wife places the fungus sprouts into the packets, after which Mr. Fung places them in the greenhouse for a month. Caring for the thousands of packets is an arduous task. They spend about half of each year in this warm and humid greenhouse. One month later, the packets are ready to be moved to the field behind the house. Sunlight and sprinklers then stimulate the growth of the fungus. When the weather begins to warm up, it's time to gather the black fungus. Spring produces the best black fungus. While Mr. Fung is away at the forestry station, his wife is on her own picking the black fungus. She carefully picks the soft and springy pieces. After only a few days in the sun, they'll become greyish-white, dry and tough. As long as they're well preserved, there'll be enough to last the whole year, as well as to send some to their granddaughter. The fungus, harvested in summer and autumn, will be shipped to many places across the country. With the snowfall during the holiday, the village in the mountain forest has become even more tranquil. After logging was banned, the forestry station started tearing down the shacks at the foot of the mountain. Their neighbors have moved away, leaving the Fung family as the last residents in the village. This year's fungus harvest was very good, yielding a total profit of nearly 40,000 yuan. Mr. Fung and his wife have grown accustomed to their simple life and diet. They'll set aside this income for a rainy day. Going down the mountain to buy fresh vegetables in the forestry region during winter is difficult. The infrequently used dining table only sees action when their daughter's family returns for the Chinese New Year reunion. Though Mr. Fung and his wife have prepared other delicious dishes, black fungus remains the key ingredient at the family reunion dinner. There will be very few more chances for the whole family to gather for dinner in the kitchen. After he retires, Fung Wensheng and his wife will move to an apartment in town. This will be their last Chinese New Year together in the forest region. where they've lived for decades.
太辛苦了，这洗脚贪黑的，说心里话，老庞，敬你一杯。
谢谢。
哎呀，家这木耳啊，就一多半儿，多大捡？俺说这岁数都大了，你说捡木耳，这起早贪黑的，这热天儿嗓子头子闹了热，也在外头捡木耳去。但是季节活，它来雨连雨天了，这木耳就瞎了，就得抓紧时间捡。一说都眼泪了。
Mr. Fung and his wife have worked hard all year. Their love for the forest is reflected in their efforts, something only they can understand. After the holiday, the couple will rent land in another village using the money they earned this year from black fungus. Hard work will remain a constant in their lives. The season's first snow has just fallen. Mr. Zhou from Aradao Baihe Township is taking his workers to his blueberry field on the mountain. They're getting the field ready for winter, during which the blueberry field will lie dormant. The branches must be covered with earth to protect them from frost. Otherwise, they'll produce fewer fruit next year. The work in the field is done. The Chinese New Year is just around the corner, and the blueberry liquor is ready to drink. Mr. Joel makes blueberry liquor every year, and he keeps it until Chinese New Year so he can share it with the other growers. In August, it rains a lot at the foot of the Changbai Mountains. Mr. Zhou and his wife are worried because it's time to pick the blueberries. Right now, they're ripe and plump, but rain could cause them to split open, making them hard to sell. Mr. Zhou knows that his losses will be heavier if he waits until the rain stops, so he decides to pick the blueberries in the rain. But when it begins raining even harder, they can only stop and wait. Mr. Joel and his wife began growing blueberries in their 40s over 10 years ago. They sow the seeds in spring and harvest the fruit in summer. Though they're very familiar with blueberry cultivation, the weather in the Changbai Mountains is unpredictable. It suddenly cleared up in the morning after several days of rain. The workers preparing to go home now return to the field. Blueberries are abundant in northeast China, both wild and cultivated. Everyone from young to old in the small village pick blueberries. In fact, Mr. Zhou's hired hands are farmers who live at the foot of the mountain. The adults work to make a little extra money, while children eat as much fruit as they can. The weather has been good for a change, and the workers picked several hundred pounds of blueberries in just 2 days. At dusk, the fully loaded truck heads for the blueberry processing factory. Every year, Mr. Zhou saves some of the blueberries to use as gifts and to keep in the freezer. But most important is the blueberry liquor he plans to serve at the family's Chinese New Year dinner. As the weather cools, Zhong Lingfa's distillery springs into action. Even in the countryside, this kind of operation is rare. 60-year-old Zhong Lingfa has been doing this all his life in this stuffy and damp place. The grain-based liquor he produces is familiar to everyone in the town.
这是今年新下的蓝莓，好，怎么样？烧的？
应该挺好，
挺好啊。
当天烧了当天准备，
供不上，
供不上。这还有排号的。
你这是纯小烧。现在把白喝，可能你这老式的就是你这一份了。
别的不多了。好酒，就是最好的时候。
再困一困更好。
搁你的越剧泡一泡更好。
这个锅就搞越剧泡一泡，困一困。
Each year, Mr. Zhou makes his blueberry-flavored liquor using Zhong Lingfa's liquor. Every family in the town makes blueberry liquor, and each family has its own recipe. Mr. Zhou pours blueberries directly into a vat, turning the liquor into a beautiful purple. Locals here still preserve their blueberries in liquor so they can be kept for years. Mr. Zhou has camped on the mountain for a number of Chinese New Years so he could tend to his blueberries. This year, he'll spend the holiday with his wife at his son's home in Liaoning province. According to an agreement among several blueberry growers, however, it is Mr. Zhou's turn to be the host for the holiday gathering. The blueberry liquor is ready to drink, and Mr. Zhou doesn't want to go back on his word. He has his wife go to their son's place while he stays on the mountain for a few more days. Once the day for the gathering is set, he and the other blueberry growers will begin preparations for the Chinese New Year's dinner. The topic of conversation at the dinner party always turns to the year's harvest and hopes for a better harvest next year. The adults let their kids taste the blueberry liquor on the end of their chopsticks, but the children are obviously more interested in the blueberries in the fridge. The adults have secretly prepared the blueberry treats for the children during the summer.
来年风调雨顺，
咱们再聚，
产量翻番。
这个发财哈。
哎，
It is now considered the height of hospitality to entertain guests at home during the holiday rather than in a restaurant. People have waited all year to share their fond memories during the holiday. When spring comes, Mr. Joel will go back to his blueberry field. The work will be just as hard in the coming year, but there's always hope for a good harvest. As the holiday approaches, out-of-season freshwater crabs appear in the market. Liao Jianxiang makes daily visits to the ice-covered pond to catch crabs. During the 6 months of winter, the crabs eat nothing at all, but they've stored plenty of nutrition in preparation for the long winter. Few people realize that they taste better now than they did in autumn. Liao Jianxiang and his wife always prepare a table of local crab dishes for the Chinese New Year dinner. Eating crabs during the holiday has become customary for the crab farmers around Panjin. The transplanting of the rice seedlings marks the beginning of the year's work. After receiving a phone call from the hatchery, Liao Jianxiang comes to collect the crab roe. It takes 2 years for the hatchlings to mature. When they're ready, they'll be moved to the rice paddies. There they'll feed on fish and shrimp as well as water plants and algae, aside from crab feed. Liao Jianxiang and his wife have been tending this crab field for more than 20 years, and much of the family's income depends on the crabs. In Panshan County, most farmers have crab ponds like this in their rice paddies. Panjin is surrounded by the wide Liaodong Bay. The crisscrossing rivers have made this a region of swamps, river flats, ditches and ponds. It's been an ideal place for breeding crabs for generations. According to an old Chinese saying, a land of plenty is where you can catch deer with a stick and fish with a ladle. In the past, this was used to describe northeast China. In Panshan County, people added, "and crabs crawl into your bed." Liao Jianxiang recalls that in the 1960s and 70s, there were so many crabs that even the chickens and ducks could feed on them. The Freshwater crabs in Panjin begin to shed their shell for the last time of the year. The crabs are usually harvested in mid-autumn. After dusk, the crabs crawl ashore to look for food, and they're easily collected using a flashlight. Before the sun rises, all of the crabs have been sold. When most of the crabs in the paddies have all been caught, it will be the time to harvest the rice. After the autumn harvest, the weather turns cold. The remaining crabs will stay in the ice-covered water. In addition to harvesting the crabs for profit, crab farmers always save some for the holiday. This year, Liu Jianxiang's crab sales went well. He had planned to buy an apartment in the nearby city for his nearly 30-year-old son when he got married. But his son's love life ran into a snag a month ago when he broke up with his long-term girlfriend.
你到这对，你想啥时候结婚吧？你这个你必须有时间，你告诉我时间结婚时间，我就给你买车时间。我这家和你妈俩这起早贪黑的整这些地，又整盘子的，挣钱有啥？这挣钱有啥用啊？
那你说这么对了，我还是起早贪黑的。
啊，你要不要啊？要，你要不要话，我和你妈俩，明儿就开始去旅游去了。过年了，我也不凶你了啊！过完正月的，你赶紧给我处对象，啊，我和你妈俩都着忙。只要人家俩同意，我这啥意见没有。该让我拿钱我拿钱，你这样该让我干啥？我这根本我就不管那玩意儿了，这玩意儿也不咱管的。先头那个这给我光黄一个了，我都后老回来，我可不管了。这是不咱管的事儿了，也不跟咱也不跟他一辈子。
Everyone in Mr. Leo's family has their own issues and concerns, but each of them is looking forward to better times in the coming year. For this reason, they've decided that this year's dinner will be a real feast. Crab balls are one of the most popular dishes in Panjin for a New Year dinner. Mr. Leo and his wife cleans more than 100 crabs in the afternoon. After pounding the crab meat to a pulp, they filter out the thick juice with a piece of cloth before steaming it in a pot to make a dish with a fine, smooth texture. Liu Jianxiang's son, who's a trained chef, has developed his own crab recipe. He coats the crabs with starch and deep fries them, then adds a little sauce before taking them out of the pot. His father loves to eat this dish with liquor, and it can be eaten hot or cold. The typical local cooking method is to stew the crabs with pickled Chinese cabbage. When the pickled Chinese cabbage begins to boil, the crab tofu is finished steaming. People who live where their food is grown always have their own unique cuisine. It may be their own creations or recipes passed down for generations.
今年就算马上就是过去了，过年到今天的今天，我希望你不是咱们3个人，而是咱4个人到5个人。
不合适，你过年从阴影再走出来吗？走出来还需要8个月吗？
过年给你1年时间，你啥也不干，出门就是找媳妇去。
我的妈！是，所以我都告诉我说该找肯定得找，我是不是得给你挑个好的？
不用啊，那啥瞅着不好说，个儿比妈高点也行，不高也行，个儿小的都是农村，反农村的都是精华。
我们家3个人吧，老正经嗑没有，你看要扯淡吧，我地还磕的是哇哇。我要想处处吧，自己就处了。
Underneath the hard shell is the delicious crab meat. The plump and tasty meat is due to the favourable climate and geographic location. as well as the hard work of the crab farmers. For villagers in southeastern China, the cold winter is generally the off-season. But for Chu Deyi's family, the busy period has just begun in the days leading up to the holiday. For several days in a row, the 4 family members brave the freezing early morning weather in their ice-covered vineyard. Qingshi Township is close to the border of northeast China. Mr. Chu's vineyard is located on a mountainside along the Yalu River. The vines are heavy with unpicked grapes that have shriveled up and become frozen solid. Every autumn, large quantities of grapes are produced along the valleys of the Yalu River. Over 10 years ago, Chu Deyi harvested in the autumn like the other fruit growers, and their crop was in by September. But now, Chu's family only pick enough for their homemade wine. Nowadays, most of the grapes are left on the vine for winter picking. These will go to be used for ice wine. The frozen grapes have been greatly dehydrated by the wind, sun, frost and snow. Have gradually shrunk as the temperatures dropped precipitously in northeast China. They develop an apricot-like fragrance, and wine made with these grapes has a unique flavor. It's been several days since they began picking the frozen grapes. To Mr. Chu's family, every grape is precious. They can only pick grapes in the early morning when the weather is most cold and bitter. The days leading up to Chinese New Year's Day are the most exhausting for the whole family. They don't even have time to purchase anything for the holiday. Most of the frozen grapes are sent to a factory the same day they're picked, but Chu Deyi uses some of them to make juice that night. The sweet juice can be served to his granddaughter or fermented to make wine for the holiday. An idea has occurred to his wife. She wants to use the grape juice to make some traditional snacks from her childhood. Although the cold weather is an inconvenience, some of the traditional dishes for the Chinese New Year can only be made during the cold winter. After cooling over the night, the grape cakes made by Chu Deyi's wife are ready. This breakfast treat may seem novel and strange to the young, but for the older generation, it brings back fond memories.
挺好吃的哈。
还行。
奶奶，你做的真好吃。
吃葡萄反正还行啊，爱吃，感觉就这么说，像天长地久的这玩意儿，像不喜欢。像是产地的东西都是一样，就不那么喜欢了。多少年了，这都30来年了。
84年、85年就开始摆了葡
萄。10多年前那时候，葡萄不好卖，这个雇车给人送去，啊，还得给人地瓜、花生，都得打的小粒儿，然后人家才给这个雇车，人才能卖进去。卖进去搞那多少给钱不知道。
那时候咱俩多辛苦，骑着自行车上盖里去卖菜，哪像现在开着车去卖菜。
Zhu Dui and his wife's fruit stand is on the side of the road leading to a local scenic spot. Growers used to have stands along both sides of the road, and the site of each family's stand gradually became fixed. Thanks to the many vehicles attracted to the scenic spot, the grapes sell very well. But as the holiday approaches, the road grows quiet, and grape sales start flagging.
这些葡萄剩这点儿，在不在乎咱们自己榨点汁儿，做点糕，给孩子留点。这一年也不看荤，这葡萄卖完了，也过去这一年了，又一年了，然后来下一年的。
几个月又混到春天，到春天又开始忙。
It has long been their custom to operate their stand until the last few days of the 12th lunar month. Mr. Chu always says that his wife is much better at sales than he is, and compared with the hard work of harvesting the grapes in winter, selling the grapes is like a vacation. The harvest of frozen grapes was bountiful this year. Now it's time for them to celebrate Chinese New Year at home. In northeast China, cabbage is plentiful in winter, and grape growers are never short of wine. This hostess is preparing minced pork with Chinese cabbage. The name in Chinese implies prosperity in the coming year. This makes it an indispensable dish for the Chu family for the Chinese New Year dinner. The children are only allowed a taste of the wine, but the adults can drink it to their heart's content. This is a rule set by the head of the family for the holiday.
这个爸你放心吧，以后家一点点俺们就是撑起来，这些活俺们都一点点接手，俺们都干。好。
People fondly recall the good times of past Chinese New Year celebrations. For a farm family who has to work through the winter, the holiday may be no more than a short break. During the year, they endure the scorching sun, severe cold, heavy rains, and frost before harvesting the fruit. The holiday presents a rare opportunity for valuable family time. At the end of the 12th month of the lunar year, hazelnut grower Wang Weihe's wife stir-fries a large batch of hazelnuts. The fried kernels are then crushed and mixed with sugar to make a filling for fried pies. Wang Weihe's family doesn't always have traditional dumplings, but they always have fried hazelnut pies. The recipe was passed on from his mother, and it's a mainstay on the table during the holiday. Wang Weihe and his wife return home just before the holiday. After harvesting the hazelnuts on the mountain, they've taken a job in the nearby city of Fushun to earn some extra money. The Chinese New Year provides a welcome break. While preparing for a family reunion dinner, they're worried about their 19-year-old son, who's still living at home.
爸，你说你这大冷天的，你这还骑车还给我送饼呢，多冷啊！这外面。
赶紧吃吧，趁热。哎呀，晚上多穿点，在外头在这岗楼里多穿点。
你就放心吧，爸。
你妈不就是怕你那什么嘛？这是烙完饼了，一热乎的给你送。
不用惦记，没事。晚上都吃饭。
吃吧，趁热赶紧吃，赶紧吃。我说给你少拿2个，你妈说不行，得多拿几个，怕你不够吃。
Their young son works as a security guard at a mountain villa not far from their home. Their son was a late life baby, so they're naturally very fond of him. His father often delivers meals to him on his motorcycle when he's on night shift. The hazelnut field on the mountain outside the window will someday be passed on to him. By mid-August, the mountain produce and wild fruit around Tieling are gradually ripening. Wang Weihe's hazelnut shrubs, which grow all over the mountain, are ready for harvesting. It's the busiest time of the year. Many years ago, people in this small village lived by tilling the soil. They collected the branches of wild hazelnut shrubs for firewood before the nuts matured. At the time, locals didn't know they were burning something valuable. Now, the locals have contracted the whole mountain for growing hazelnuts. When harvest season comes, they'll live in a shack on the mountain until the nuts completely ripen. All the local hazelnuts come from this mountain. Wang Weihe's hazelnuts are a success, meaning that the nuts are ripe and abundant. The size of the harvest varies, so not every year is a bumper harvest. The farmers only need to taste one nut in a patch to see if it's time for the harvest. If it's plump and ripe, the whole patch is ready. Wang Weihe has spread out his hazelnuts in the yard to dry. While the sorting can be done in the factory, he insists on doing it himself. When the nuts are placed in water, the empty ones that float are discarded and the ones that sink are retained. The nuts selected in this way are all fully developed and they can sell for a higher price. These hazelnuts represent the hard work and hope of this whole family, and they'll be enjoyed by many families during the holiday. Fried hazelnuts are traditional for the Chinese New Year. The fragrance of the frying nuts brings back memories of previous holidays. Wang Wei-he remembers as a child greeting older members of the family by kowtowing on the ground. He was rewarded with a handful of hazelnuts from his mother. When he first brought his wife to spend the holidays with his parents, his mother served her hazelnuts and presented hazelnuts to her relatives as marriage gifts. 20 years ago, Wang Wei-he and his wife worked from dawn to dusk every day, frying hazelnuts to sell in the town. But they only earned less than $2 a day. The family's current comfortable and prosperous life is based on their hard work over many years. The whole family depends on the hazelnut orchard, so they work hard to keep it going. Wang Wei-he is going back to his plot before the end of the first month of the lunar year to prune the bushes to encourage next year's growth. After the Chinese New Year holiday, farmers return to the mountains, forests and fields to work. This thawing plot represents a family's hope for the coming year. They're starting their work for the new year. They've never forgotten the connection between sowing the seeds and reaping the harvest. They fondly remember how a good harvest this year made Chinese New Year even better.